Where does this silver squeeze take us next? That's what we're going to discuss in this video as we explore. You might think that all of this talk about silver squeezes is a bit overdone, but in reality, we are in the midst of a very important silver squeeze. And it ain't over yet, according to one article that has published a story on this, which actually gives a very poor argument for why it isn't over. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about the reason why it's not over in a broad sense and define exactly what these silver squeezes are. There's two of them, by the way. And before I get into that, I want to remind you, channel sponsor Summit Metals. They are a great company, fast-growing, excellent customer service, and fast shipping. They also have the Salivate Metal Round. This is a 2-ounce round, and I did an inquiry, and they have less than 50 of these now in stock. So the supply is dwindling here. This one's got a little bit of patina to it, but excellent work done by Intalio Mint. And you can get one there. The link to it is in the description of this video. And so check that out if you're interested in one of those. But nonetheless, the silver squeeze movement. Well, there is two different silver squeezes that have occurred. The one was a movement back in 2021 and 2022 based off of the Reddit Wall Street bets, where silver stackers are trying to emulate what they had tried to do with the GameStop. And AMC and others to try to pump up the price and to kind of fight against the power brokers in Wall Street. Of course, you can't really do that with silver, although there was a squeeze on the retail market briefly that did impact the price negligibly. But nonetheless, that was a very minor application of a silver squeeze, and it was solved and resolved very, very quickly. But what's happening now, and has been going on for several months, is a real squeeze of silver, and that is the silver squeeze 2.0 broadly, and there's multiple phases of it and a revolving door of squeezes that are occurring in different markets. And in this article, it talks a little bit about what happened, in that squeeze when we've seen the tariffs that have led a lot of the London markets and other places to ship silver to the COMEX. And, there's an overstock. There was a lot of silver in the COMEX, and a lot of that silver caused a lot of stress in the markets in London, which is really the central hub of precious metals trading in general, and silver in particular. You have the London fixed price, which comes out of the market there, out of the LBMA, the London Bullion Market Association. And so you have that, and you have the squeezes that are occurring with regards to supply chains to try to backfill silver that has been taken out of the vaults there. It caused quite a problem and quite an issue. And in this piece, it kind of finishes it up talking how the silver squeeze ain't over because, according to one expert who thinks that the LBMA is on the verge of breaking down, but I don't think that's happening now. There's enough silver that's there that it has cooled down. He say it's cooled down a bit, but I'd say it's cooled down a lot because backwardation is no longer an issue. Now it's in contango. Now the vaults, we've not seen any numbers, and they're not as transparent and reporting as often as they should. There's still a lot less silver there than should be, and as we've seen in history, but that's been the way. It's been that way for a long time. So I don't think there's really any threats to the London bullion market at these days. But nonetheless, there is some stress in China, and there's been some stress in China now in the Shanghai Gold Exchange, the Shanghai Futures Exchange, and the vaults there. They are at record lows right now, and I did a video about that recently, and if that were to continue at the same pace, it very well could collapse. And I'm not saying that's going to happen either, but nonetheless, it could bring us to a situation where it very well could be serious enough that it could have a ripple effect across the entire bullion market and cause stress and maybe backwardation yet again. Nonetheless, the spot price, the physical spot price of silver has been higher in China than it has been in the Western markets for quite a while now, and it continues to be the case. And that has created arbitrage opportunities, and that is what you're facing there. So, but nonetheless, the silver being pulling back, we saw it pull back, and even now as I record this video, it's slightly pulling back a little bit here. It's above $51 an ounce, but there's a lot that is moving the silver in a northerly direction, and that's up because of what the Federal Reserve is going to do. And the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering interest rates according to what we know now. That could change very quickly, and literally hours from now when new data are released, that could have an impact one way or the other, and may be dramatic. But nonetheless, that's only temporary, because what I'm talking about here is the long silver squeeze. And that long squeeze has been happening really underneath of the original silver squeeze movement, and that is the deficits of silver compared to the supply. The demand is outstripping supply. And most everybody agrees that if it's not actually done that, it is very, very close to doing it, even by the most conservative estimates now. In fact, there's more pressure for a number of years on the silver market now than we probably have seen in history, honestly, which means that mining is not keeping up with the rate of production. And that is the long squeeze that we're seeing. And that's happening now and has been happening. Couple that with what's going on with the Shanghai Gold Exchange and the Futures Exchange, I think that is a recipe, as well as geopolitics, inflation, and all of that, for increased demand for silver in many different areas to try to beat the price and moving up even more than where it is now. Couple that with increase in retail demand that we're starting to see now in the past month or so. More and more people are starting to buy, and there's not quite as much selling. So that means we're going to be coupling another squeeze, although, we're not anywhere near to the points of demand that we saw back in 2021 and 2022 for retail silver, much as like the products you see here, and some of the premiums have come down. People are seeing opportunities in that way to make that happen. But I'm going to be now referencing another piece from the Tradable about solar demand that could push silver consumption to as high as 450 million ounces by 2030. Now, that is a high brow. In fact, there's a wide gap there, and I think, honestly, that's likely not going to happen. But nonetheless, we're going to continue to see demand here, and we're going to talk about it in light of what else we've recently learned about this as well. And I'm going to talk about that as I get closer to the end of this piece. Silver consumption in the solar industry has exploded over the past decade, jumping from under 60 million ounces in 2014 to over 230 million ounces in 2024. And back in 2015 is when I had my solar panels put on, and I'm telling you, they were a lot cheaper then than they are now. No question about it. They're very expensive. New projections show this trend isn't slowing down. Conservative estimates put solar demand at around 290 million ounces by 2030. And I think that's probably more realistic. And honestly, I don't think it's going to be much over that. Why? Because, some of the subsidies have gone. And even with some of the subsidies have gone, there's still demand for it. But there's other things that are kind of keeping it from climbing too much higher, as well as an oversupply in China. And that's right. China has overproduced, and they're one of the major producers of photovoltaics around the world. And so when they have increased their supply, they're selling panels now that were created back in 2023. And so, and a lot of this stuff I've even mentioned in the past, how they had so many of them. Some of these solar panels are being used as fence rows. So I think it's probably likely going to be more towards that conservative estimate, and maybe even lower than that. So while more aggressive forecasts reach nearly 450 million ounces, which I think is unrealistic, but even 290 is a whole lot more than 230, especially when you consider that the difference between the two makes up the total demand in 2014, 60 million ounces. The numbers reflect how quickly solar panel manufacturing is ramping up worldwide, with silver playing a critical role in photovoltaic technology that cannot be easily replaced. The problem is that silver mining has not kept pace. While demand for renewable energy keeps climbing, production levels have stayed relatively flat. The growing mismatch is becoming impossible to ignore. That started as gradual growth in the early 2010s has turned into a steep upward curve. The gap between how much silver the world needs and how much it's producing is widening fast, and that's starting to reshape conversations around metal markets and clean energy infrastructure. So what makes this particularly interesting is that the solar power isn't some niche industry anymore. It's a major driver of global silver consumption, and that is true. It really is. It's become a massive part of the scale of what's been driving silver demand to this point. But there's something else that is going to maybe replace that shortfall, even if we level out in silver demand for photovoltaics. I'll talk about that in a minute. As countries push harder on climate goals and solar installations multiply, both conservative and bullish scenarios point in the same direction. Sustained upward pressure on silver demand. With supply growth lagging behind, the evolving dynamics could have real implications for pricing and investment strategies in metals tied to the energy transition. Well, that's possible, but I want to probably even say it may remain flat. In other words, we may see 2025 estimates to be around 230 million ounces as well. But even if we continue to stay at that pace, well, they're still not able to keep up with the supply, with the demand, rather. The supply will not be able to keep up with the demand. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that demand for silver decreases to 100 million ounces or 90 million ounces. That's still far above the demand that we saw in 2014. Even if it scales back, that is requiring a whole heck of a lot of silver. There's 830 million ounces produced each year, and there's other areas in industry that are going to be requiring a lot of silver. Data centers for artificial intelligence and all those models and things like that. Some people feel that we may be in the midst of an AI bubble that could burst pretty dramatically, and that is possible. But I think there's a portion of the AI infrastructure that I think is likely going to continue and is going to require a whole heck of a lot of energy to be able to produce those. And these data centers are going to provide that energy as we transition into an AI world. And no matter what your thoughts are about AI, it's happening. And it's going to require a lot of silver for that. You also have electric vehicles, and that is going to probably be pulling back as well, moving more towards hybrid models. But those hybrid models are going to replace some of the full electric vehicles, and that still requires, wait for it, a lot of silver, a lot more silver than just your regular ICE vehicles, which stands for internal combustion engine. So either way you look at it, I think silver demand is going to increase, and that is the long squeeze. So we're going to have a squeeze on several different directions here. That is a part of the larger silver squeeze 2.0, which will continue, even when backwardation is not a factor at this point in time. But nonetheless, we'll see how it plays out. I think that is going to essentially translate to silver prices staying up for the most part. In other words, very well above $40 an ounce. I think the lowest it will go in consolidation as we go through this long squeeze is probably $40 at the bottom, is my feeling. I think that's where the bottom is going to be. But we could see definitely north of $50 play out again in 2026 and maybe even touch $60. It would not surprise me if we saw that happen. And towards the end of the year, I will give my prediction of where silver's going to go in 2026. So stay tuned for that. And again, if you're interested in one of these Salivate metal rounds, there is a premium to them. But nonetheless, there's less than 50 of them yet left, and it is just silver. But if you're interested in this type of thing, they are there. And I cannot promise that they will be restocked once this supply runs out. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Hope you found this video informative, insightful, and educational. Would like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.